DawgNation's exclusive postseason coverage, Go for 2 in 22, is made possible by our partners, R.S. Andrews, Marlowe's Tavern, Georgia Farm Bureau, Royal Caribbean, and by the Wilson PC Personal Injury Attorneys. The 7-6 Apparel Company, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services of Georgia, Discover Dunwoody, and by Kroger. Go for 2 in 22 from DawgNation. Here's Brandon Adams.
Hello, DawgNation. I'm Brandon Adams. Welcome into this special Go for 2 in 22 event. We're live here at the Media Hotel in Los Angeles, the hotel right next to LAX. It's Connor Riley joining us here there as well. A few minutes ago, we got a chance to hear from both these coaches. Our final time to hear from Kirby Smart and Sonny Dykes prior to tomorrow night's national championship game. And we've obviously been on video a lot here this weekend, showing you some of practice, showing you some of media day. Haven't really had a chance, though, to kind of digest what has been going on over the course of these last few days. So I'm happy to have Connor Riley with us as we do that right now. Connor, you've been obviously writing a bunch of stories at DawgNation.com, embedded with this team here. They've been here since Friday evening. What do you think we've kind of learned about Georgia since they've arrived and in these final preparations prior to the national championship game?
Yeah, they've talked a lot about, wanting to be hunters all year. I think they can smell it now. I think that they can smell that they're, to use a bad metaphor, blood in the water. That, and look, there's been some national media pushback about how, this team, they're saying they're doubted. They've been the number one team for much of the season. Nobody was picking this team to win the national championship at the start of the season. And I know that because I, in maybe your footsteps, took a contrarian play and picked Georgia to win it all at the beginning of the season simply because I believed in the talent on this offensive side of the ball. And I thought the defense would make strides at the end of the year in showing what they could be. Now, the defense has been a little leaky down the stretch here, but I think that's a product of, A, the way the LSU game played out, and B, C.J. Stroud played one of the more incredible games I've ever seen from a quarterback against a Georgia defense. And while Max Duggan is a really talented player capable of making some plays and certainly hurting Georgia with his legs, I don't think he's the same gifted thrower of the football. And I think this team knows, and look, they've said, we're not trying to repeat. I think they understand the significance of what a win on Monday night would mean for both the guys on this team, guys like Brock Bowers, Stetson Bennett, Chris Smith, who played obviously key roles last year. But as Kirby Smart has said time and time again, there are a lot of guys on this team that didn't play this huge role on last year's team. Guys like Zion Logue, that was a backup a season ago. A guy like Tate Ratledge, who couldn't play last season. There are guys on this team, more so than the guys that played a big role in last year's national title win over Alabama, that are eager to put their own imprint in a game like this and have a sort of national championship moment that they're going to be able to remember for the rest of their lives.
Darnell Washington's obviously been the most important, most discussed Georgia player here since they've been in Los Angeles. The sense that I get, I showed a little bit of video on Twitter the other day of Darnell getting off the plane, walking towards the bus, both in terms of kind of who you've talked to, coaches and players. They're all saying the same thing they said about Warren McClendon and Lamb McConkey going to the Peach Bowl, but also talking to people here around Los Angeles. The sense that I get is that Washington's going to have a uniform on. I'm guessing that he plays, but I'm also fairly confident at this point he's not 100%.
Yeah, I think if this were not a national championship game, I'm not certain we would see him, but I believe he's going to dress out. We'll see how effective he is. John Stinchcomb a few years ago made a really great point about, with bigger guys, you're more okay if it's sort of a ligament issue rather than a bone issue. And it does, from speaking with Kirby this week, make it sound like it is more of a ligament issue than sort of a bone-on-bone issue down there on the ankle. And obviously he's a big guy, and when you're pushing off either to fire off and block a guy in front of you or run a route, it's going to be difficult on a bum ankle. But I think Darnell is going to gut it out and try and give whatever he can to this team to help them win. This potentially could be a showcase game for him because obviously I think it's well known that at least I expect him to go to the NFL next year. And this is going to be a game where in the NFL you're going to have to play hurt, and especially big games late in the year, and what are you able to give your team? And I think this game is going to say a lot about Darnell Washington, not just in terms of his abilities, but the football character that he has, knowing that, he's probably going to the NFL next year, could be a very high draft pick, first or second round potentially, but he wants to gut it out, play one last game for his teammates, and show what he can do and what he means to this team.
I want to talk to you a lot about the contrast between these two teams, but one example of that kind of right away is the way in which they've prepared. Yesterday Georgia practiced inside SoFi Stadium. I actually asked Kirby Smart on Friday when they arrived here what it was going to be like getting ready for a stadium they hadn't played in. Last week you could say they had the advantage over Ohio State because Ohio State had not been to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Georgia, obviously now in that role of coming to SoFi Stadium for the first time. I was in the building yesterday, my first time to be there. It is a little bit different in terms of you feel a little bit of the open air stuff because the way in which the stadium is constructed is it looks like a dome, but there are some open breezeways. It's not windy or anything like that, but you can sort of feel it. One of the things that Mike Griffith brought up, which I think is probably a pretty good point, if you were concerned about humidity at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, you obviously didn't really have that feel inside there yesterday. It was dark by the time we were in there. It'd be interesting to see at kickoff how much sunlight comes through. Connor, you're a big NFL fan. You probably have a little bit better perspective on kind of what it looks like in daytime and what it'll kick in daytime hours there tomorrow. Conversely, though, TCU practiced off-site yesterday. Georgia, did not really have, I guess, the practice that it maybe was expected to have prior to coming here, but they did practice once they got here. So both these teams taking a little bit different tact in terms of how they are using these final days before this national championship.
Yeah, I think one of the more humorous moments from this press conference today was Sonny Dykes was talking about his life and everything that's brought him here, and he brought up his wife, who he's only had, and you have a wife, Gina, she's amazing. I'm sure you've had more than 3 arguments with her in the long time you guys have been married.
Thankfully, we don't argue very much, but we've definitely argued more than 3 times.
Yeah, definitely more than 3 times.
And one of them, and I actually do find this very insightful, was about Shaq versus Kobe. And Sonny Dykes said that he was a Shaq guy. And I think when you look up there on the podium today and see, Sonny Dykes and Kirby Smart, which you can see the full video on YouTube, you get that sort of Shaq energy from TCU of we're happy to be here. We know this is not expected of us, and we're going to come out here and embrace it. And I will say this, for people expecting Georgia to just roll over this TCU team, this is a tough TCU team, and I've spent so much of the season talking and writing about toughness and what it means to this team. And I think Michigan and TCU players have said as much this week. I think Michigan just straight up didn't think TCU was a very tough football team, and I 100% believe that is a big reason why they lost that game. You're not going to have that be the case with Georgia on Saturday.
I want to ask you more about TCU coming up here in a moment. First, though, it's Go for 2 in 22. We're live here in Los Angeles, getting ready to watch Georgia hopefully bring home that second straight national championship. We've had a great collection of sponsors who made this all possible all month long, so let's pause here. Let's thank some of them, and I want to ask Connor a little bit more about what he's seen from the folks from Fort Worth here this week, TCU in Los Angeles. But first, a quick message.
DawgNation's postseason coverage, Go for 2 in 22, is made possible by our partners, including
Kroger. Visit Kroger for all your holiday needs and to stock up for bowl season.
R.S. Andrews, DawgNation's choice for all your heating and air needs.
Marlowe's Tavern. Need a tasty gift this holiday season? Try a Marlowe's Tavern gift card. Visit marlowestavern.com.
Back here, Go for 2 in 22, live in Los Angeles, getting ready for Georgia TCU coming up on Monday. Connor Riley here, Brandon Adams as well. A moment ago, you're talking about what you've seen from TCU throughout the season and the way in which, in really impressive fashion, they beat Michigan in the college football playoff semifinal in the Fiesta Bowl last weekend. However, I take all that really seriously, and yet it's hard not to admit, and listen, I say this as someone, I'd like to try to find any angle for TCU whatsoever because I'm a partisan. I want Georgia to win, so therefore I want to consider every possibility that might occur for that not to be the case. So I'm going to try to oversell TCU more so than undersell them. And yet, yesterday when we arrived at Media Day, which is the LA Convention Center, kind of right next to what used to be called Staples Center, what the crypto arena, whatever it is, downtown Los Angeles where it was. And so we kind of show up there for that, and I got mixed up in the TCU team as they were coming in for their portion of Media Day. Connor, I got to tell you, it's noticeable how they look in comparison to Georgia. Doesn't mean they're not good. Doesn't mean they couldn't even win on Saturday. But they are nowhere as big as these dogs.
No, yeah, this is a TCU team, and I think it speaks to the job that Sonny Dykes has come in and done there in getting this program here in year one. I did a story on Timon Mitchell yesterday. This is a guy who, even with the losses that Georgia had on the defensive line from last year, was not going to be playing a big role on this Georgia team on the defensive line in 2022 rather. And so he transfers to TCU, and he's become a very important player for them on their defensive line. And the fact that, TCU had to go in and bring in a guy like Timon Mitchell to sort of beef up that defensive line. And this TCU defense, Michigan game, I think notwithstanding, has been a real strength for them against, Texas, that Texas team that all the spreadsheets out there said was going to run all over TCU. They went out there, they out-physicaled them, pushed them around, and, consistently throughout the season, while you're not wrong in your point of TCU not looking as physically big as Georgia, and Georgia's a different animal than I think TCU has played at any point this season. Look, they didn't have a talent advantage against Oklahoma, and they whooped them. Didn't have a talent advantage against Texas, and they found a way to beat them as well. Michigan, I think, had a very clear talent advantage in that game, and TCU was the much sharper team in that game. And look, I don't think Georgia's going to come out and be nervous, but the pressure is absolutely on them in this game, and I do think that allows TCU to be a little bit more loose, be a little bit more relaxed, and say, hey, look, win or lose, this is an unbelievably successful season for TCU. With Georgia, there is some pressure on them to deliver in this game, given they are a massive favorite, and given you've already beaten Tennessee, you've already beaten Ohio State, you've beaten so many big-time teams already this season. There is that expectation that you're going to do it once again.
I think that's right. I thought a very interesting moment from the Kirby Smart press conference, and by the way, you can watch the joint press conference that Kirby and Sonny Dykes had. It's on the DawgNation video channels, including YouTube. Go back and check that if you missed that out a little bit earlier today. Is Kirby gave some great compliments to Joe Gillespie, the TCU defensive coordinator, and this is not lip service. If you kind of obsessed with like college football internet, things like that, Gillespie's been sort of viewed as a coaching star on the rise for quite some time. So I do believe that the Horned Frogs defensive coordinator does have the respect of Kirby Smart. But the actual interesting point in all this, though, is that Kirby talked about the fact they had been watching film of him going back to when he was Tulsa defensive coordinator in preparation for Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl at the end of the 2020 season. And what really stood out to me on that is here's TCU, who you've got to imagine is first-year coaching staff, not a team you expect to see in the college football playoff. This is as far removed as what you could have been expecting to play as anything, and yet Georgia still had already watched a million things of film on the coaches in this game. It's just really amazing how no stone goes unturned here, including already a lot of back study on what Gillespie was all about for a different game, but nonetheless, they were already pretty familiar with him from a film watching standpoint.
Right, and this is just another, I think, great example of this. Earlier this week, I wrote a story about Brock Bowers and how exactly Georgia won his recruitment. A lot of it just came down to Georgia was just out in front of this. They did a lot of early legwork. They visited him out in California before the shutdown. They got him on campus in January of 2020 before the shutdown. And because them and Todd Hartley had done so much prep work in advance, when the recruiting world essentially came to a stop, they were in a great spot to land a player like Brock Bowers. And I think similarly, you're seeing that play out with TCU here this week. They've scouted and seen TCU time and time again. I was talking to Chidera Uzo-Deribe, and you can see the full video up on our YouTube page. Incredibly impressive individual, let alone considering the fact that he and his wife just welcomed baby twins into the world last week, and he's somehow running on even less sleep than we are. But Monday night's going to be the fourth straight year that he has gone up against Max Duggan. He has seen Max Duggan. He saw him twice at Kansas, once at SMU, was briefly there on the TCU staff this offseason. And so there, you bring up Joe Gillespie and the similarities there. Garrett Riley is the offensive coordinator, brother of Lincoln. So obviously
looks just like him, by the way. Yeah. Just like him. Yeah. Looks just like him.
And so, it speaks to this Georgia program and all that they have done, all the work that you see and you hear and we write about and all that goes into it. You do see the payoff in moments like this where, yes, it's a team before the start of the season. You couldn't have said anything. And 99% of Georgia fans could not have given you much on TCU before the start of the season. And this Georgia team already has a very good idea of what they're going to see on Monday night.
Can we get a final thought from you on the game itself coming up in a moment? I also want to ask you this. At the end of the press conference earlier, you have the photo op moment where Kirby and Sonny Dykes stand side by side with the trophy in between. It's the same thing you see every single year. And yet in most years when Kirby's standing next to somebody, it's been a Nick Saban or a Jim Harbaugh. Maybe it would have been a Ryan Day last week. Even Ed Orgeron, the SEC championship at the time, he had this kind of feeling of kind of an iconic, very well-known, famous type guy. As Sonny Dykes stands next to Kirby Smart right now, he doesn't quite have that feel. So is this an example of I hate to say it this way, a coaching mismatch for a guy like Smart who has all the experience, a guy like Dykes who hasn't been in this spot yet? Or will we look back on this, whether TCU wins the game or not, even if they're not even really all that competitive, will we look back on this as the start of something where one day it does seem to be a little bit more sensible that Smart and Dykes were standing side by side?
I would lean towards the latter there. I've been so thoroughly impressed, not just by what Sonny Dykes has done over the course of the season, but even hearing him and talking with him this week. And his coaching career is very unique and very different from what Kirby Smart. Obviously, coming from Alabama, coming right to Georgia, getting a lot of the resources he needs. I mean, Sonny Dykes went out to Cal, and that's about as hard a job you can try and win in college football. And he, had some success there, but also struggled and got fired after 4 seasons and really had to reset and reinvent himself. And he goes to SMU and he wins there. And then they bring him over to TCU. And that was not seen – it was seen as a good hire at the time, but it was not seen as a slam dunk, hire that is thought to be that will elevate TCU to the level of national contender. And, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 potentially as early as this offseason, I think TCU is really set up where if they're able to keep this thing rolling, because he mentioned, they had six transfers on official visits this past weekend at TCU. A lot of those guys are coming from SEC programs. I believe they've already got 3 now, with Trey Sanders announcing he's going to be playing there from Alabama. They've got 3 Alabama players coming to join that program. I think Sonny Dykes, with where they are located in Texas, with the success that they have had, with what they've been able to do from the transfer portal standpoint, this is a program that to me seems like it is on the rise. And, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, there's a bit of a power vacuum there. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest as we move to a 12-team playoff, you start seeing TCU take up more and more of a spot in the national conversation. I think Sonny Dykes and what he's been able to do so quickly there is a big reason why.
We'll have some final thoughts on the game itself, and we obviously got lots of video coverage throughout the day here. In fact, tonight, we can't wait to see you 6 p.m. your time, Eastern time. We'll be live again for a Go for 2 in 22 event. We'll be taking your calls live. Really excited about having you be a part of that. We did this last year, part of the national championship. It was a great way to set the stage for what we all saw in Indianapolis. We want to do that same thing again. You're going to tell us how it is you think Georgia gets it done. What would it mean for you to see Georgia win a second straight national championship? We're going to do that this evening, 6 p.m. Eastern time, live from the DawgNation video channels. You get to be a part of that show. Can't wait to see you there for that. And, of course, tomorrow it's DawgNation Daily at our normal time, and then we kind of roll into – we have these sort of weird days sometimes where you have, like, regular day in the morning, and then you roll right into a game day after that. So we'll do DawgNation Daily and then traditional game day stuff. Beyond that, obviously, some extra fun and surprises in there, too. So one more time, 6 p.m. tonight, your calls. Tomorrow, DawgNation Daily from Los Angeles. Game day coverage after that. We're going to be on video like 9 million times, plus a little bit more from Connor Riley here, too, with some kind of final thoughts on the game itself, at least for now. But first, though, quick word from our sponsors who make Go for 2 in 22 possible.
DawgNation's postseason coverage, Go for 2 in 22, is made possible by our partners including
Georgia Farm Bureau. With local agents all across the state of Georgia, Georgia Farm Bureau is the home team. Find your agent today at gfbinsurance.com.
Discover Dunwoody. Stay at one of our 9 hotels and enjoy easy access to 2 MARTA stations, which is just a short ride to downtown. Visit discoverdunwoody.com/DawgNation to book your stay today.
Royal Caribbean. Reserve your cabin on the 2nd annual cruise with DawgNation in April. Visit royaldogs.com to reserve your cabin today.
Back here live, Go for 2 in 22. We are in Los Angeles getting ready for Georgia and TCU coming up on Monday. Some kind of final thoughts from a prediction standpoint here. And Georgia's been about a 12.5-point favorite over the course of the last few days. And if you want to really if you want to geek out just to the maximum degree, you can find out almost about anything. So I did some research. Since 1980, 12.5-point underdogs have won about 19.8% of the time. So if you look at that, Georgia got about a 4 and 5 chance of winning this game on Monday night. Does that feel about right to you that you'd give TCU about a 1 in 5 shot of pulling the upset here, which makes them a little bit more dangerous than some of us maybe feel comfortable with? But is that about numerically something that kind of makes sense to you?
Yeah, I think so. I'd maybe say 1 in 4, maybe about a 25% chance. You look at what this TCU team does, and there are some areas I think where they can give Georgia trouble. We saw CJ Stroud. Yes, he's an incredibly gifted thrower of the football, but when things were breaking down and he was able to create things with his legs, that's really where Georgia got hurt a lot in that game against Ohio State. Duggan, I think, does a better job of that than Stroud does, and his legs are absolutely going to be a factor. He had 15 carries in the Big 12 championship game against Kansas State, rushing for over 100 yards in that game. He had 15 carries against Michigan. Yeah. I think with Kendre Miller banged up, he's obviously going to try and gut this game out, but I expect Max Duggan to be a big part in the run game. And look, this is a Georgia team that over the course of the season, they've been turnover glitchy, so to speak, on the offensive side of the ball, and TCU absolutely hammered Michigan in that aspect. And if Georgia's going to do that and they're going to turn the ball over like they did once against Ohio State, that made that game a lot more difficult than it needed to be, I do think that there is a potential path there. But I think ultimately if this Georgia team comes out sharp, comes out buttoned up, and is able to play 4 quarters of football, something I know they want to do after not doing that against Ohio State, I don't know how much TCU is going to be able to do to stand in the way of that.
I'll tell you my biggest concern, if we're talking predictions here for a moment. There's an expected point total. We call it the over-under. It's the total points both teams scores added together. Some of you know this a lot. Some of you don't know this quite as much. Georgia historically, especially when it beats Power 5 teams, Georgia goes under the total. There are fewer points than the experts expect there to be in a game like this. Except last week against Ohio State, the total was set much higher than we're used to seeing Georgia total set. Obviously, a lot of that's because of the fact that Ohio State also has a high-powered offense. The total was somewhere around 62-63. The actual game total sailed way over that. Well, here we are once again looking at Georgia TCU on Monday, and once again you've got an expected point total of somewhere in that sort of 62, 63-point range. I don't mind telling you this. For me to feel as comfortable as possible about Georgia winning this game, I don't think this needs to be a game played in the 60s. If it's another high-scoring game where both teams are kind of finding some success offensively, I do think you bring the idea of a TCU win into this a little bit more. Game goes under that, especially if it goes significantly under that expectation of 62, 63, somewhere in that neighborhood, then the more likely it is to me that Georgia wins and wins convincingly. But the thing that gives me the most pause about someone who ultimately just wants to see Georgia win the game is the point total set much higher than I'd prefer it to be a week after the Georgia game sailed over, and we know what a wild affair that was.
Right, and remember, they went over in LSU as well. 50-30 was the final score there. I think if you're a Georgia fan, look, as much as we want to see points and see that, if Georgia wins this game 35-14, you're not going to care. You're going to have just won a second straight national title there. I think if you're Georgia, look, we've seen times throughout this season where they've just gone into God mode and really just run through teams. You know, Oregon comes to mind. I think Tennessee in the first half against South Carolina. They've shown that they can really ratchet it up. And Georgia's able to come out and play sharp in the first quarter and continue that because they've been a very good second quarter team throughout the season. I think you even saw that against Ohio State. But they weren't great to start that game. If they're sharp and executing from the jump and able to put a lot of pressure on TCU, I think you're going to be in a spot where they can potentially sit on the game in the second half like you've seen them do a couple times this season.
All right, last thing for you. If Georgia wins, which is obviously a big if because you got to play the game, if they do, will they celebrate less than they celebrated last year because they've already won a national championship? Will they celebrate more than they celebrated last year because they've now won 2 straight, something that no one's done in the playoff era and something no one's done since Alabama in 2011, 2012? Is it a national championship? It's a national championship no matter what the story is, so therefore it's about the same. What's the atmosphere going to be like if Georgia does this again?
I think it's going to feel a little bit like relief, just given this has been something that has been talked about for so long with this program. And really, even I think there as well, when you look at the wider 10,000-foot view here, you know, the thought was, all right, Kirby didn't come here to just win one national title. He came here to bring multiple. And if Georgia's able to do that, you know, that's checking off another box and doing what Georgia had come here to do. I think there are players on this team that are going to celebrate this harder than they did last year. You know, Jamon Dumas-Johnson is a big name that comes to mind there. Guys that were not necessarily playing a huge role there. I'll be interested to see what some of these seniors, you know, Chris Smith, Nolan Smith, Stetson Bennett, how they take this in. Because obviously last year's game, the fact that it was Alabama was so emotional. But for a lot of guys, they've put so much work into this Georgia program. And it's going to be their last game for a lot of them tomorrow night. And this program is not where they are if it is not for them. So I'll be interested to see what this game afterwards means to a guy like Stetson Bennett, who, you know, it feels fitting to wrap it up here in L.A. We talked so much about it being a Hollywood ending. You know, for him, if he goes out there and wins this game, you know, for all that he has been through to do this and what he's done at Georgia, I think it's going to be a really special moment down there on the field. And that's considering he was crying with time left to go in that game still, and then swinging 23-year-old Pappy Van Winkle. I know you don't love giving away free plugs, but I feel like we'll be okay right there.
Something tells me we won't get Pappy as an advertiser, so you might as well give it away.
I'll be really interested to see what this game means to him tomorrow night, as it is his final collegiate football game.
I think that's really well said. Connor, you've had some great stuff at DawgNation.com the last few days. I know you've got plenty more as we head towards the game. So, folks, stay close to DawgNation on the website at DawgNation.com. The video channel's there as well. Told you, we'll be back live 6 p.m. tonight. Special call-in show setting the stage. It's our own national championship preview, which we invite you to be a part of, and we're looking forward to that. Then I'll see you tomorrow morning for DawgNation Daily. John Stinchcombe's going to be a part of that, but also a lot of the stuff from L.A. here this week. We'll give that to you. And then, of course, game day action after that. So it's a busy next couple of days from us. Then hopefully on Tuesday, we're recapping and showing you the celebration, the fun, and everything that goes down there. So thanks for being a part of Go for 2 in 22. Wherever you are, I hope you're getting ready to enjoy. Let's face it, doesn't get much better than this. A second straight national championship game for these dogs. We'll talk to you again very soon.
DawgNation's postseason coverage, Go for 2 in 22, is made possible by our partners, including Kroger. Visit Kroger for all your holiday needs and to stock up for bowl season. R.S. Andrews, DawgNation's choice for all your heating and air needs. Visit rsandrews.com to see how they can make you smile today. Marlowe's Tavern. Need a tasty gift this holiday season? Try a Marlowe's Tavern gift card. Visit marlowestavern.com. Georgia Farm Bureau. With local agents all across the state of Georgia, Georgia Farm Bureau is the home team. Find your agent today at gfbinsurance.com. Discover Dunwoody. Stay at one of our 9 hotels and enjoy easy access to 2 MARTA stations, which is just a short ride to downtown. Visit discoverdunwoody.com/DawgNation to book your stay today. Royal Caribbean. Reserve your cabin on the 2nd annual cruise with DawgNation in April. Visit royaldogs.com to reserve your cabin today. The Wilson PC Personal Injury Attorneys. Because Atlanta happens from out of nowhere. When the unexpected happens to you, visit atlantahappens.com. The 7-6 Apparel Company. The perfect holiday gifts for the hard-to-find person in your family. Visit the76.com to start shopping today. And Berkshire Hathaway Home Services of Georgia. The best time for new beginnings is now. Forever moving you. Visit bhhsgeorgia.com to start your search today.